Hey everybody, welcome to Watches with Dennis, and it sure has been a little while, but I figured I'd go ahead and put together a live stream after I got caught up on some stuff. And we've got a few topics that we'll go ahead and we'll cover today that I think are kind of interesting that have happened over, say, the last month or so. Some of these are more recent than others, but I have stuff all the way back to some Seiko things that I noticed a while ago that I really wanted to touch on. And so instead of putting together an individual video, I thought, well, you know what? I think I would be more pleased with just handling this in a live and not doing edits or anything like that. So while we are getting underway, because I did not really schedule this because I had some stuff I was working on this evening and only now just got finished, do a little bit of watch catch up sort of stuff. So not a whole lot has been happening recently. I have been working quite a bit and traveling around the state for my job. So I just have not been able to follow a lot of watch information like I normally would. But I've tried to keep up on some of the watch blogs to be aware of what's been going on. And so, in the meantime, I guess in terms of watch related stuff with me, I do have one watch. I've never shown it on stream because it's not been working. It was a gift from a friend of mine for Christmas. It's actually a Spiro Agnew watch, which has an interesting U.S. political history given who Spiro Agnew was. And I've tried to fix it myself. And so I've been monitoring eBay and getting kind of service movements, replacement old movements to try and fix it. And I have gotten it running twice, but it never stays running. So I know I took it all apart, I cleaned it, put it back together. Power goes all the way through the gear train, and then the balance sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. And while I have a number of balances of this fairly low cost movement, I have succeeded in constantly bending hairsprings. I've bent at least two. Once because I was using pegwood to try and start the balance, and I slipped, and a splinter of it caught the hairspring, which you could fix with tweezers if you were better than me. And then the first one actually was I was trying to inspect it, and I didn't have the loop in the holder. I had just pinched it in my eye, and when it started to fall, I just involuntarily reflex went to catch it, and that was my hand with the tweezers, and I was working on the movement, and so right out of position. So as a little story on that before going on, I finally decided, I'm dropping like $15 to $30 a movement on eBay for these EV8800. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to just take it to a watchmaker and get it repaired. Only problem is I don't know any watchmakers. So I just searched them online because I'm like, okay, well, there's got to be an area watchmaker because all the other watches I've had haven't needed service yet, or in the case of one watch, I went to an authorized dealer and sent it in for service. It was one of my Rolexes, which had a chipped sapphire and stuff. So I sent it in through the official channel. So that's not someone I would normally go to. So the first watchmaker I went to with a prior watch that I ended up getting the seller to replace. And that time he didn't work on that type of movement. Well, it turns out he doesn't work on pin lever movements either. They're, I don't know, too cheap, too finicky. He didn't want to mess with them. So I found another jeweler who said he would do it. He quoted a price. He didn't know it'd be a range. He said no more than 200. Inexpensive watch, but I thought, okay, well, let's do that. And then he proceeded to try and convince me to buy a Tag Heuer Link, which I explained I wasn't interested in. And just as an interesting aside, while I was there was another guy there trying to get a ring or something fixed. And the watchmaker, he takes my little Spiro Agnew watch. I also brought in all my spare movements because I'm like, here are movements, because he mentioned that it could be hard to source the parts. I'm like, I got parts. I just cannot get it to work. Here are some parts. And the watchmaker's like, cool. And then he goes, you know what you need? You need to get a watch like this guy. And the guy beside me was wearing an Omega chronograph of some sort. So I said, oh, a Speedmaster? And he goes, no, an Omega. And I thought, this watchmaker, it wasn't the guy wearing it, it was the watchmaker. I thought, I'm pretty sure it's a Speedmaster. And now I'm a little worried that you didn't know the baseline model of the Omega brand. But the irony was he's telling me this and then he starts talking about the tag that he has that he could bring in if I was possibly interested in a Tag Heuer Link. I wore a Tudor when I was in there. Actually, I wore this one, my Black Bay Bronze, and I kind of thought, Well, clearly he likes Omega better than Tudor. So I know Tudor and Rolex seems to be trying to position Tudor to be against Omega, but at least in that guy's eyes, it ain't happened yet. So anyway, that's my only watch story I had to kill a little bit of time before we start going on the topics, which is what probably most people who are tuning in are interested in. So let's do a little bit of screen sharing because I got 4 things I want to talk about. I want to talk about a Zenith. I want to talk about an AP watch. I want to talk about a Zodiac. And I want to talk about the Seiko GMT. But let's go ahead and start with the Zenith. Probably because it's the least interesting one to me, but still was interesting enough to touch on. So as you can see on the screen now, we have the Zenith. Let me get the name right. Defy Extreme E Island X Prix watch. Now, I've been interested in Zenith for quite a while. I've talked about that on several streams. I think on several of the live streams. I'm more interested in their newer El Primeros, especially those that are leaning into the new movement that they have, where the chronograph seconds hand goes around the dial once every 10 seconds. And you lose the hour sub dial on that, but in exchange, you get this easier to read, just more visually interesting chronograph. So that's really been like what I might consider buying. This is well beyond my price range, but these Defys have been interesting because they are the ones that do the 1/100th of a second on the chronograph. So very, very, very cool movement. I saw this watch and I thought, let's go ahead and throw this on here. Now the pricing wasn't as bad as I thought it would be initially because I've seen some other Defys and I thought they were pretty extreme on the pricing. 200 meters of water resistance, that's pretty impressive. I like orange, so the orange band's neat, but obviously they haven't gone full orange dial like a Doxa, which is what I actually would prefer to. We could throw an orange strap on anything we want, right? When we don't need Zenith to sell that to us. So 27,100 and only limited to, it was the limit that surprised me. Not that they put a limit of 20 pieces. I'll highlight that part. But that even with that low of a limit that they were doing 27,100, I was just a little surprised that it wasn't more. That being said, given the state of the economy right now, maybe I shouldn't be surprised because I don't think it's a great time to be launching ultra expensive watches, or at least scaling up the pricing more than we've recently seen over the last couple of years. Overall, though, I don't think this watch, other than it's mechanically interesting, it's an ugly watch. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. I think it's an ugly watch. I have an extreme bias against skeletonized dials. I think they're hard to read. I think the subdials have been executed pretty well on this watch here. But let's see if we can blow this up a bit. There you go. So I like how the subdials have been employed. However, I still just reading the time. It's not the worst, definitely not by a long shot, but it's not good. I don't think it's good. So mechanically, I think it's really neat. I think the case is okay, very industrial looking, which isn't really my style, but I get what they're going for. I mean, you see the little pictures with like the cars and stuff. It's an off-road racing series that this is all themed by. So makes total sense for all this. Just not really something I would be in for, but I mean, the carbon look, if you're into it, this might be something you're interested in, but I really just, if I could change one thing, it would be to unskeletonize this dial. And I think the watch would still be really industrial and a little easier to read. But, you know, they did what they did. So really, that's all I had to say on the Zenith. So I'm going to go ahead and move right along. Now, this was a weird one. This is one I missed when it initially came out. I don't think, when is this news from? Pretty recent, right? Start of the month? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. July 1, at least for this Hype Beast article. So I started seeing references to this on the little, if you ever use the Chrono 24 app, I can't see it on the website. Let me say, okay. I can't see it on Chrono 24's website, but on the phone app, you're able to load up blogs. It shows you like the most recent blogs and you can click it. It just gets a like Hype Beast, a blog to watch, Hodinky. I think a bunch of them are in there. It's kind of like a feed, almost like Reddit. This is a really nice way I found to quickly see screenshots of headlines of what the most recent watch releases are, because that's what a lot of the discussion is, of course. So this I saw, and I saw it way, I didn't know these were gems. It was way zoomed out in the initial photos I saw. And so I knew it looked like sound, you know, these little sound waves. And I was really surprised at this. So this is not something I'd ever really thought of, but this is Audemars Piguet's it's a Royal Oak Offshore, and they have released these music editions of it. And it seems they have inlaid gemstones, not just around the bezel, which is something we've seen from a number of watch manufacturers, from Rolex to more obscure brands, but rather also into the dial face itself, which is pretty cool. At least, I mean, that's what this one did. I think they got like, so this one looks less like that and a little more stayed, or I don't. It reminds me of Breakout in a way. I know what it's going for. It's going for that soundboard style look. I never would have thought there would be any interest in watches that looked like that, though. Very cool photos that they've got here. But apparently they've unveiled a few of these musical themed Royal Oaks. And then I thought, okay, well, what's the damage then on these things? So apparently there are 5 of them. And so they have a couple in 37 millimeter and 3 and 43 millimeter, which both sound, I mean, I'd be more 37 millimeter myself, but okay. So they got good sizes to appeal to a lot of people. And so looking at this, they've got a tight, from this summary, they've got limited 500. You've got 500 titanium models in 37 millimeter and 500 in 43 millimeter. Then there are 2 18 karat gold models, one in 37 millimeter and one in 43 millimeter, but there's no limit. And those are the ones with the inset jewels. So, and apparently they've got, obviously the 43 millimeter is a larger watch dial. So it's got 230 stones versus 166 for the 37 millimeter. And then they've got some sort of new in-house movement. It's time-only watch, and the pricing on all this starts at about 32,000 US, and that's for the titanium model. So I'm not in the market for Royal Oaks. I guess I do vaguely remember that they were around 30,000. So I initially thought that these would be a lot higher, but when I realized, going through this piece, that they weren't all limited, I could see why at the starting price around 32K was achievable, is because there's not actually a limit on these. But I guess maybe this is for Dead Mouse or something. Like, I'm trying to think. Like, I could see why DJs in particular would love a watch that goes with this sort of style, like what you might see on a musical mixing board or something. But again, most DJs I know don't make very much money, so I don't know how many are actually in the market to be buying APs, much less Royal Oak offshores. And even with it being, at least some of them being unlimited, really question just how easy these will be to obtain. Probably not very easy, just like most of the Royal Oaks seem to have become quite challenging. But I think this will go over better than the Black Panther watch did, but I imagine a lot of the purists are still going to hate this. It's just a little too fun. And but we'll see. A lot of the complaints I heard about the Black Panther watch was that it was a collaboration with Marvel. This is clearly not a collaboration with any particular brand, but rather it's just a theme that's a little more out there than I think normal people would associate with, or normal AP fans. But that being said, when you look around the bezel here, I mean, it's still just essentially a vibe of the Raybo Daytona, but in an AP format, at least to me. Going more deep on the dial and saying it's actually about music is another step. So anyway, just an interesting thing, but I thought it would be worth covering briefly here while I'm streaming. And so let's jump into, I've got 2 more watches that I want to talk about, and these are far more on the affordable side. Excuse me, the problem with doing it live is I have to pause for fluids on occasion. So Zodiac, famed company for their dive watches, dating back to really the era of the dawn of the dive watch. I think it's one of those historic brands, really right there with Rolex and Blancpain in terms of known dive watch, early dive watches, but definitely not a brand that is in the same cachet as either of those 2 companies at this point. The Fossil group owns Zodiac at this point. But what I think has always been very interesting about Zodiac, and I do own a Zodiac, and we're actually going to touch on that a little bit because this has elements that are very reminiscent, is that they have been willing to be a lot more, and the word I will use is fun. They've been willing to be a lot more fun with their colorways. And this watch is at least in part, the colorway of the version I have. So this is a Super Seawolf in titanium. It is a limited edition. However, it is also a pro diver. So beyond the change in metal, there have been a number of swaps versus what has come before it in the sort of watermelon flavor. And let's talk a little bit about that before I dive more into this, just so there's a little bit of background. And so, if you're not familiar, here's a piece from a blog to watch about Zodiac Super Sea Wolf, which was called the Watermelon. And this is the one I have. So some things that are noteworthy. Obviously, the dial is a different color. This is a silver versus the titanium has gone with a black. The hands are differently shaped. This uses the stick hands versus, I don't know what you would call these hands. Someone might know. If they do, and you could say in the chat what these hands are called. I do not know. Hey, Neff, not much. I haven't been available to do videos in a while, so I thought I would just throw together a live stream and talk about 4 watches, and we've already torn through 2 of them, the Audemars Piguet Music Edition Royal Oak Offshore and Zenith's limited Defy Extreme, whatever this one was, this weird orange one that's ugly, but I still wanted to talk about it, but I already did. So we're talking about Zodiac's titanium, and what I'm doing is I'm comparing it to the colorway that came before it that and it happened just incidentally. And it's probably why it caught my eye. The titanium one is it looks a lot like this one, which is one I own. So you can see this 200-meter water-resistant watch. We'll touch on the improvement here in a moment from the titanium. And it's not a pro diver. It's not certified in the same way. And one of the big things is the movement. So this watch, I mentioned that Zodiac is owned by the Fossil Group at this point, and they do have in-house movements that they've developed. And so this, the non-pro diver Watermelon uses the STP 3-13 automatic movement. And the reason why I think that's interesting from an in-house perspective is I mentioned at the very start of this live stream that I was trying to get a watch serviced, and the first watchmaker I went to with a pin lever escapement wouldn't work on it because he wouldn't work on pin levers. That was the same watchmaker who would not work on this watch when I brought it in because I had bought it and I tried to regulate it because it was not well regulated and the regulating stud snapped in my screwdriver. And so I thought, okay, I opened the watch up. I need to own that. And I went to the watchmaker to pay him to, replace the stud essentially. And he had no familiarity with the STP 3-13, even though it's very, very, very similar to an ETA. He just didn't have any of those parts, so he wouldn't work on it. And ultimately, the retailer I bought the watch from took it back and swapped it, even though I broke the movement myself. The watch still ran, but I couldn't regulate it because there was a lot of issues with the dial. There were imperfections in the dial. So they went ahead and just sent me a new one, and they acknowledged that there have been issues with the Fossil Group. So anyway, that's different though from this titanium. And I will note Neff here in the chat has said the Tetris AP and that he's not a fan. It's not something I would ever own, but this one without the jewels, for example, I get it. I think more Breakout. I see why you could say Tetris, but to me, I just turn it on its head. The colors kind of remind me of Breakout, but I could definitely see the Tetris, especially with the little red equalizer dashes going on there. But and Neff notes that the 313 is basically a 28-24 with a swan's neck regulator. Right. No, Neff, that is correct. And so I thought, because it's technically in-house, but it's really a 28-24, like all it needed was a new stud. Chances are they would have changed the whole swan neck regulator. The problem was the stud broke off in the swan neck. So short of drilling it out, but with these mass-produced movements, I just figured, apparently, he didn't have one, which I get. If the swan neck regulator, the whole thing needed to be replaced, the whole balance cock had to go. Well, obviously, the ETA 28-24 would have been a different design, and assuming even that the regulator jewel, the balance jewel at the bottom of the shaft was in the right position, it still would, it would have been a modified movement. So I see why he didn't do it. But they're not doing that with this one, which surprised me because again, this is time only. So, okay, I get why they wouldn't use the exact same movement because this version, the 313, has a date function, and no one loves those. No one loves the ghost date. But going through this when I was looking over it, so they've done the ISO 6425 specification. So they get to label it as a professional diver's watch. It's 300 meters of water resistance, not 200, so it's a deeper dive. Then obviously titanium, so lightweight, 42 millimeter watch, decent size for a dive watch. I think most people would concur. and they used the Sellita SW 2001. So, and I knew that, I believe I knew, and I can be corrected obviously if I'm incorrect, but I knew that they were still using third-party movements for their GMT watches, Zodiac was, but I thought for their time and date, they were going in-house, but clearly they didn't here. Also, with this Sellita, they went ahead and got it COSC certified. So right-clicked. So they've clearly gone with a much higher grade of movement than what they have been doing in most of their Super Seawolf line lately, which is pretty cool. The price is steep on this. It's an LE model, but I don't recall seeing how many they were making. And they might say on Zodiac's website, but I've always found it a little murky with Zodiac. Zodiac, I see them pop up used quite a bit, but if you're after a particular color, it seems to be pretty challenging because even the non-limited ones, they seem to make in very, very small batches. And then they're kind of, get on a wait list or go around online and trying to find a dealer that has your watermelon or has your sherbet or whatever, color scheme you're going for, your colorway. So anyway, the Super Seawolf Pro divers that aren't titanium are about $1,700. I believe the Super Seawolves that are not pro divers are more in that $1,200 to $1,400 range, and then this titanium model is about $2,500. So quite a bit more. I know that in this professionalwatches.com article, they chalk that up to being because of the titanium. I'm gonna say I'm gonna say that's more COSC certification and stuff. There are plenty of other watch brands like Citizen that offer you titanium that don't add $1,000 to the watch. So I think that's a little sus, as they say in that old Among Us game. But yeah, it is what it is. Zodiacs looks super cool. My only thing about it myself, I like the way this looks. It's just after my experience with my first one, I would really want to buy it in person so I could inspect the dial. My replacement Zodiac that I got, I bought it online, and the online dealer told me they would look through their collection and find me one that had a better dial, and then their watchmaker regulated it too before they sent it to me. So it's very accurate. But it was way better in terms of dial, but I still saw, there's dust under the crystal. There's a minor imperfection. This was stuff I could really only see under a loop. My first one had the paint had spilled on the orange part here. It spit the black paint for the lines. It was sloppy. It was sloppy, and you could see it with the naked eye. I was really quite shocked for a watch that was over $1,000 to have that many flaws, which is too bad because it is such a storied brand, and I think it could really do Fossil a lot of good to really push Zodiac on collectors, and that's what they've been doing. But if you're charging over $1,000, look at how people go after Seiko with the misaligned bezel stuff in dial lineups. When you're over 1,000, it's not going to be a lot of mercy. And I popped this up for a bit so people can't even see my head, but Neff notes, it doesn't surprise me that they changed the movement. I'm not sure what it was really, but I heard the STPs had a lot of issues. Funny, them being Citizen, they should use La Joux Paris movements instead. Well, they're not Citizen, they're Fossil. And I think those are two, Fossil Group's its own group, and then Citizen is its own group as well. I'm trying to think what other issues there were with the STP. The one other thing I can think of is it's a little weird to screw it for the screw down crown. And I know I ran into an issue where I backspin it to get it started. And that's something you can do on a lot of watches where you'll go ahead and twist the crown while you're pushing it in counterclockwise and then go clockwise so that it threads properly. I think I've read there are some people that have had some struggles with the STPs regarding that. Like if they do it without backing it in, that they've stripped the threads. I don't know. It sounds pretty extreme, but it's what they claim. So I don't really see a reason to doubt it. Another issue is some people have noted issues where these watches, the STP movements do feature hacking, but sometimes when they pull the watch all the way into the time set position, the final crown position, that it doesn't seem to always engage it right away. And they have to kind of fiddle with the crown a little bit. And then it seems to take after they muck with it, but almost in a way not as extreme as the weird loose stem approach of Vostok or anything, but like they get into the date position, it pops into position from 0 to 1, pop it into 2 for the date, pop it into 3, but it doesn't always seem to know it's in 3. I've never had that on even the one I sent back, though I only had that for about a week. I've not experienced that myself, but I've read a few people on Watch You Seek mention it. So that's what may be the situation there. So the final of these 4 watches that I thought was worth a discussion, and I was so close to doing a video this morning on it because I actually got really excited when I heard about these at first. And then I realized they were Office GMTs, and my will to do a standalone video completely died. I should have known better once I saw the price. But so anyway, we're going to talk now about the Seiko 5 Sports GMT series. So most of you who are watching this video are probably aware, but if you are not, Seiko 5 is sort of the Seiko line of watches that's their approachable line, affordable line of mechanical movement watches from the brand. A lot of ways it's seen as the replacement for the SKX. There are a lot of people that think it's a poor replacement. There are a lot of people that say it was some trade-offs. I don't know a lot of people that say it was like a unilaterally great move because some of the specs were compromised, but the movements that were powering the old versions of the watches were very archaic. They didn't have hand winding. There were a lot of things. But anyway, so GMTs. For those that are not familiar, a GMT watch is simply a watch that will allow you to tell the time in at least one other time zone. And so you can see on the images of this watch, and we're over at the SeikoWatches.com website, that you've got your hour hand and your minute hand, and then these red hands. Those are the GMT hands, and there's a little stick baton second hand there. So it's got a GMT hand. Also, the bezel is a 24-hour rotating bezel. So it rotates kind of like a Rolex GMT Master 2 would, and you have the ability to, though this might be unidirectional. I'm not quite sure. I didn't read up on all of the specs as I should have. This is using a basis on their caliber 4R movement. The watch has some interesting things, but anyway, so let's talk a bit about it. Obviously, GMT is designed for traveling into multiple time zones. Overall, the look I like quite a bit. I mean, we've got really clear date when, and it might even be, this angle might be a little bit better, but okay, we got some better views here. But all right, so we've got the Cyclops zoom for the date. I like that this is not a day date, but rather just the date. It's zoomed in. Okay, you might get a little bit of a Rolex vibe, but I don't think anyone's ever going to glance at a Seiko 5 and think it's a Rolex. So I just think they did it for ease of legibility, which again feeds into how they've done these hands. You've seen most of the GMT hands are red, but on the orange one, they've got a clear black line. So it's easy to see. But the pricing is really, really impressive. It's under 500, I think. What is it? 475. So it uses a 3 hertz movement, and they call it the caliber 4R34. It's okay power reserve, 41 hours. It's not great, but I think the main things that, aside from talking about the GMT, which we will, are the Hardlex Crystal, which is something we're used to seeing on the Seiko 5s, but it's not compelling. At this price point, I would normally expect sapphire. And then the thickness. So this is a pretty thick watch. Obviously, the diameter is pretty big too. It's a 42.5 millimeter, which again, this is kind of their dive watch design. So I understand that. Thickness is 13.6 millimeters. By comparison, I believe this, well, I'll take it off my wrist. This is the 43 millimeter, so half a millimeter larger. This is the Black Bay bronze, not the 58, the old bronze. And this watch is, I believe, about 14.5 millimeters. So basically, it's a millimeter thicker. This is my thickest watch I have, and this is a beefy boy. This is not a watch that I would wear with anything with a cuff, because honestly, I would struggle to get a dress cuff over it. So again, travel watch, yes. Travel watch for business meetings, maybe. I mean, it is thinner. But I don't know. Hey, Ryan, welcome to the channel. We're just talking about the Seiko 5 GMT because we've already talked about all the other watches I plan to talk about. But as I was reading up, and I didn't really see it here, I had to do some more research. It does have 100 meters of water resistance, which is nice. Not a screw down crown. I know that creeps a lot of people out, but these Seiko 5s do have the crown guard. So, I mean, I don't know. I guess it depends on where you planning to swim on it, swim in the water with it, because Hamilton does this all the time. They are often not doing screw down crowns for 100 meters of water resistance. So, I mean, I wouldn't go swimming with it, but I wouldn't worry about getting it wet. But you should be fine to go swimming with it. The thing is as I was reading through, I noticed that the way they said the function worked is you pop it into, I guess, you pull it into position 1, and that's where you can set the GMT hand. You turn it in one direction and a hand moves, and then you turn it the other direction and you set the date. Is how it's supposed to function. So as I pulled it up on some other sites, I was thinking, okay, when I first heard that you could turn it and it would advance, my thought was, oh, did they actually get a travel, or what people call a true GMT watch, for under $500? Because that would have been quite amazing. And unfortunately, I guess it's just not the case. So for those that aren't familiar, there are two styles that people categorized. I didn't know this until recently, but two styles of GMT watches. There's office GMT and true GMT. True GMT is where you have independent control of the hour hand, and the GMT hand will stay static when you move that hour hand. So Rolex GMT Master, that new Tudor Pro watch they came out with this year, the Rolex Explorer 2, which is a watch. It's my only GMT watch. It does that. Like, I can go and I can just move the hour hand. The date will advance when the hour hand crosses the 24-hour mark. And you have a GMT hand that when you're in normal time set mode will scroll. And the idea is you can quickly set your hour hand to the local time, and your GMT hand will be still back at home time, or GMT, or whatever you wanted to do. Or if you wanted to modify again, you could also, if you had a rotating bezel, you could adjust the bezel like what these do, like these Seikos. The Rolex Explorer 2 doesn't have a rotating bezel because the watch was not originally designed for travel. It was designed so you could tell the time if it was day or night when you were spelunking, because, there are just so many spelunkers out there. And so the office GMT, my understanding is, instead what you do is you're rotating the GMT hand in a mode. And so it goes around, and you can also just twist the bezel to align with it. So it's not that it's a bad solution. It's just depending on what you want to achieve. One is designed so that you would, if you're using the GMT hand in that fashion, most of the time you instinctively look for local time to be the hour and minute, not looking at the GMT. So I guess it's just a different way to look at it. But it was interesting. So let's see. I see a few comments here. Ryan says, thank you. I appreciate it. The Seiko 5 GMT is a nice watch from what videos and pics I've seen. I have not watched any videos yet. I did read a couple more articles today, or tried to. I had a lot of meetings today. I really like the look of these. The sort of dive style with the GMT. I think it's a really clean looking watch. I think the Cyclops works for this. I don't think it looks too much like a Rolex. So like stylistically, I really, really like this. It would have been so cool, but I get it at the price point if it was true GMT. But if I didn't have a GMT, this would be pretty tempting, because beating this would, I don't know of a lot outside of quartz that you could do, that you could get something like this. So functionally, I think it's pretty impressive. And it would be cool to finally have a bezel I could rotate to help with the time tracking, but I don't currently. Neff says, speaking of Tudor, the new Ranger is coming out tomorrow on bracelet, strap, or NATO. I saw a couple of pics. Looks good. Not sure what size it is. Hopefully less than 41 millimeter. I had not heard anything about this. That's interesting. So one of my earliest videos was not about a Ranger. I was going to say, I thought I had a video about a Ranger. I guess I never have. It was the North Flag. That's what it was. I think my second video I ever did was about the North Flag. Really weird watch. Back when Tudor was being a lot more experimental than they are now, where it's all Black Bay all the time. But hey, with a new Ranger, that might give us something. We'll see what the community thinks. I haven't read up on it. I hadn't seen anything on it yet. So I see also, Neff has also noted that GMT is already a hit, sold out in a lot of places, and a bunch of people in our private Discord have one and are getting one. Okay. Well, yeah, what little feedback I saw, because again, I hadn't been trolling through the comment sections on the articles or anything, has just been pretty good. Okay, I did see one video. They didn't show video of the watch. It was Federico. I think he touched on this and that he was pretty pleased with. I know he has a Seiko he likes to wear for travel already, so I'm not too surprised. Excuse me, I got a cough. I apologize. And for longtime viewers probably know this, but I've never owned a Seiko. At least I can't think that I have. As a kid, I don't think I ever had one. I think I had Timex, and I have one. I have a Grand Seiko watch, but that's not the same. And it was after it spun off as its own subsidiary. It's not even a Seiko branded as Grand Seiko. It's its own thing. So I've been thinking for quite a while that I should probably get a Seiko because they are extremely popular. And I have a mix of affordable to less affordable watches. So it's nothing about the brand itself. I've never ended up pulling the trigger on any of them. But I saw this and I thought, well, maybe, but then I do already have a GMT. So it's like, I'm not sure it's scratching a box that I need. And that's what I'm kind of been looking for, is something to scratch the box. And see Ryan noting about the difference between the Office and the Real. And that's, it was, I'll just Google up a thing, because there are all sorts of discussions about it, the true or the travel GMT, and of course Watch You Seek. We love Watch You Seek. So I'll just, people weren't seeing what I was typing. I was loading up a screen so one could see the discussion. So true GMT, he probably writes it up better than me. True GMT easily changed main hour hand in 1 hour increments while leaving the GMT hand on your home time zone. Another type, Office GMT or Caller GMT. I hadn't heard that before. It's more staying put in your own time zone, tracking the other time zone elsewhere. Latter is the more commonly found. So very, very, very interesting. But yes, and welcome Design. And yeah, we had just been talking about the Seiko 5s and how they were Office GMTs. But when I first saw them, I briefly thought, oh, it's going to be a true GMT, the most affordable true GMT I have ever seen by a country mile. And then I was like, oh, unfortunate, but not surprising. I mean, at $475, what really getting an Office GMT in a non-quartz for under $500 is pretty impressive. But of course, leave it to Seiko. So that makes sense to be able to accomplish that, by doing their own in-house movement. So Neff says he has a Seiko. Okay, and it's a Seiko 5. He's not a fan of Seiko. Too many divers, QC issues, and all really thick. I forgive the thickness with all of this really being a because they're so dive heavy. Like, I get it. I get dive watches being really thick. I gave it to a friend actually, but I had a rotary Super 7 dive watch, and very, very affordable, kind of in that Seiko SKX-esque look. It had a few other features that I kind of liked, and it was and is, I believe, still in production. And it was the only one I actually went swimming in of all my dive watches, because I have that. I have the Black Bay Bronze I was wearing today, which is my thickest watch at this point. And then we talked about earlier, the Zodiac titanium here, and that I have the watermelon colorway that is not the titanium, the old-fashioned one with the silver dial. And so 3 dive watches has been my max. I've only ever had those 3. And so I'm down to 2 right now. But much, I guess, where I would say, like Neff's comments about Seiko having too many divers, I have not pulled the trigger on another diver because I'm not super inclined. Like, I don't love dive watches like a lot of these watch people, like a lot of you all do. A lot of people I found just love dive watches, and I think they're really cool, but they also look real samey to me. So I need them to look pretty different. The only one I've readily been looking at right now is a 300M Omega Seamaster, because it's so different. And the helium escape valve is not my favorite feature, but it does give the case a very different shape. So in no way looks like my Tudor or my Zodiac, which I feel look very, very different from each other as well. So, and Design's going to be reviewing one of the Seiko's soon. Cool, cool. I kind of trolled around a little bit on YouTube today. Actually, I was trying to see if Seiko had any like official reveal video because I just wanted some like B-roll, and then I couldn't find any. I didn't want to use another channels because that didn't feel right. A little snippet I would, but otherwise I just want promo footage. And then when it was Office GMT, I was like, I got 3 meetings today. I guess I won't put a video together. Because putting the videos together when I'm not in them, other than audio, which is what I mostly do now, other than when I live stream, because it's such a chore to set everything up. And I'm like, I don't think anyone really wants to see my head anyway. I think people want to see the watches. So it's easier just to get the promo photos and do the discussions and stuff. So, but I wanted some footage of someone's like messing with the GMT hand. That's what I wanted, but I didn't find it from Seiko officially. But that's okay. They clearly are selling them well enough that they don't need to do something like that. But Neff has noted, I'm not a big diver guy either. I'm like more dressy, do it all kind of watches. Yeah, I kind of that so hated generic term sports watch. I like sports watches a lot. I like dress watches as well, but nice dress watches cost a lot of money. And with dress watches, to me, it's kind of like, how often would I wear them? So I really only have one that would be, I suppose, in today's age, classified as a dress watch, and that would be a Reverso, which, of course, historically was not a dress watch; it was a sports watch. But everything else is kind of sporty. That Grand Seiko I have is one of their heritage line ones, and I took it off the bracelet because the bracelet's okay. Sizing the bracelet was a nightmare. I must use bad words. It was a nightmare though, just because of the tiny screws and everything. But I put it on a leather strap for now, which was great until it got up over 90 degrees Fahrenheit here. And now I absolutely do not want to wear leather at all, which is why I was wearing the bronze today, because I threw that on a rubber strap quite a while ago because it came on leather, which I think is weird for a dive watch. I see Design has said, I don't know how to swim, but I live in Aruba and have 10 dive watches. I blame YouTube. See, I was trying to be nice and say all the collectors. It's really the YouTubers that are all in on dive watch. It's kind of disgusting. It's like a cabal of people that have inspired to do dive watches. And, I suppose it stems from a lot of things. Seiko making a ton of them is part of that. And there are a lot of Seiko collectors because it's real easy to get into Seiko collecting, or at least it used to be, because the prices on each unit were relatively low, but there were so many models. You could do all sorts of collecting styles. Then, of course, like the Rolex Submariner being so famous from James Bond, and now the Omega Seamaster being so famous ever since Pierce Brosnan was Bond, that there's a lot of, even beyond watch collectors, there's a lot of dive. Plus, I think, and this might not be fair, but I think when it comes to like micro brands and stuff, I'm going to just assume they're easier to build because maybe people are just building them because they sell. And that's the thing. But it seems like if there's a micro brand, this is why I actually don't look at micro brands very much. Anytime I hear about a micro brand, I immediately assume, oh, they're just going to make a bunch of dive watches. This is what they all seem to do. And maybe if they get established, they'll branch out and be like, okay, well, now we're going to kind of do a Flieger. And now we're going to kind of do a generic sports, or we'll do some sort of field watch. They'll all be sports. They'll always be sports, which makes sense because they way better sell than dress watches. But it always seems like the dive watch is the first. And I mean, especially, I guess, if you're not getting it like ISO certified or anything, it can just be dive inspired and just throw it in some steel shell and give it a clicky click bezel and you're done. So I know I said that kind of mean, but that's just what it seems like. I mean, dive watches are a dime a dozen. So, and I see Design noting that part about the bezel, multi-$1,000 fidget spinners. And that's one of the things where maybe it hasn't clicked for me. I do not normally rotate my bezels at all. I played with this one today a little bit because I was actually like cleaning it. So I was like, okay. And it has a nice fun click, but when I'm wearing them, I don't do it. I actually, before putting this on, I wore my Zodiac Super Seawolf for 2 days. I didn't adjust the bezel at all that entire time. And I don't normally. I keep them in the centered position and I just look at them. So maybe that's part of the reason why I don't have the same compulsion for the dive watch is I don't end up like when I'm working and stuff, I fiddle with pins and spin those around and throw them on the desk. That's what I mess around with. I don't mess around with a watch. So Just one of those weird things. Neff says, I have 6 dive watches, all from when I first got into the hobby. It's not that I don't like them. I'm just kind of burned out. But I'm wearing an Aquas right now, so cry happy smiley face. I'm sure there's a technical term for that face that I did not use. But yeah, no, that makes sense to me. And I'm trying to think when I first started getting a lot of watches, I definitely started looking at a lot of dive watches because I had my Explorer 2 for a really long time, for a decade before I bought more watches. And then I got a sports watch. And then I was like thinking more along the lines of themes. What did I not have? Because we're all different types of collectors. And one of the things that I steered into pretty quickly was I want the watches to feel very, very different. And that's where like I have rules such as I will not buy more than 2 from a single brand, at least for now. So it's like, I don't want multiple Mings or Rolex or Tudor or Omega or Seiko or Vostok or anything. It's like, and then beyond that, it was more getting things that were different. And they didn't have to be as distinct as, pilot watch, field watch, dive watch. It could be just like Vostok dive versus Tudor dive. So I did that I forgot about that. I did have a dive Vostok. No, I take that back. I was good. It had a submarine on the dial, but it was a Komordirsky, which is not a dive watch. So no, I only have the 3 dive watches. But that's been an aesthetic choice of mine. I pretty early on decided that I didn't want to be one of those collectors that had a box of 24 Seikos or a collector that had a box of 6 Rolexes, because to me they all just look kind of the same after a little bit. If they got really diverse model lines, obviously what I'm saying is untrue, and you could successfully Seiko does do a lot more than dive watch. But when I saw what other people had from a distance, all it looked to me like were the dials were different colors, and otherwise it just was like, here's 8 pairs of socks and they're the same brand, but they're all different colors. Well, who cares with socks? But with watches, I thought it would be more fun to not have it be so samey. So Ryan has said, I bought my very first Seiko this year. It's a Seiko 5 with the black dial. Looks like the SKX, and I love it. I eventually went to get a dive watch. To be honest, I don't know why, though. Laugh out loud. Well, just for the joy of it. Just because if you fall in the fountain I was going to say at the mall, but I guess they're all closed now. You fall in the fountain at the zoo, then you be pretty sure that your watch will be okay. See, that's the nice thing about the dive watch. Whereas when you've got like a 30-meter water resistance watch, you're like, I know I can technically be out in the rain in this, but do I really want to stick it under the faucet of the sink? Probably not. So just one of those things. Design says, hey, Aquas are awesome. Oris is the most affordable independent out there. I have looked at Oris several times. But they've got, don't they have like a Big Pilot as well? Is that them? I mean, I know IWC has Big Pilot, but I thought Oris also had like some pretty Big Pilot-esque pilot watches. That's always what I first think of with Oris. And actually, I almost covered Oris in today's list of where I probably should have done them instead of like this ugly Zenith that we talked about at the very start of today's stream, because Oris has that New York Harbor watch that looked pretty cool, but it was limited also. And I was like, I don't know. I probably shouldn't have talked about the Zenith because it's limited too. So I guess I could have swapped one limited watch with another, but I didn't. You just got stuck with whatever I wanted to blab about. At least the weird music APs we talked about, they weren't all limited. Some of these are not limited, but they're so expensive. I in a way, I just don't care. I cared enough to talk about it just because it was so weird. So Tetrisy or breakouty or soundboardy or however we want to call it. Neff said, one of the things I've tried to do is try out different styles of watches. So diver, Flieger, pilot's watch. The one thing I don't have is a really traditional dress watch, a 2-hand no date. And I don't either. The Reverso I ended up getting, I got with a small seconds. And in a way, it's been kind of the, if I got, I've been looking at the Cartier Dumont, the new ones, the quartz ones, because with quartz, if you don't have a second hand, I'm kind of thinking it could be nice and look good, but be cheaper is kind of the angle. Because to me, I've still, and it's probably just too modern of a thought. I know this wouldn't have been an issue pre-quartz, but it's like, I just don't, if there's no second hand, do I really care if it's mechanical or quartz? Because no one's going to know. So it's not a good conversation starter if the second hand just isn't there. And design says, yes, they have pilots and really chunky. That's the one thing about them that they are thick. Yeah, and again, for like a pilot's, that's okay. I mean, I have a Stova Flieger, and yeah, it's not a dress watch. So, and the one I have is a what size do I have? I think I have the 42. I think it's a 42, not a 40. But it's just one of those things we go with when we take certain designs. Neff says, my Aquis is my favorite watch. Case finishing and dial punch way above their weight. Love Oris. I really like their cherry dial designs. And that's been a watch type. I've never had a red dial watch. And I've looked a little bit at Oris. I've looked on the inexpensive side. I've gone all the way to the Orient, like the Komatsu. And they have another K word one that's really neat to me as well. Actually, I probably would have bought the Orient by now just to try it out. The only thing is, I would be willing to pay a little more and have it with sapphire, and I'm just a little. I guess I could swap it. Well, getting sapphire crystals, I don't know. Esslinger, I can order mineral glass pretty easy, but finding sapphires, I don't know. So I'm not a huge fan of changing out the crystals myself, but unless it's a watch I'm working on that's already got like a junker acrylic that I'm going to throw away, but. And Neff had noted his redundancy about a pilot being a Flieger. But it's a fair enough point, like in the sense that you might talk about a Flieger and then the other style pilot watches, because that's been one that's been real interesting to me. And I don't just mean like the other World War II-esque, like Allied side versus the Flieger German style, but rather the ultra complicated. Like, I'm thinking, when you say pilot watch, I don't immediately think Flieger. I think Breitling with a slide roll in the dial. The bezels, the slide roll. That's what when I hear a pilot watch, that's what I initially think. And then if you say Flieger, I think, oh, you mean old timey, real easy to read watch. Two very, very different functions. So now I will say, God, you know what? Let's pull it up. Let's pull it up while I'm searching here. Oris, they do have they did confuse me recently with that Pro Pilot. That new one they did, like, I feel weird, like I'm not describing it well. Here, I'll load one up. There we go. This thing. Why is this a pilot watch? This is not a pilot watch. I was so confused when I saw this at Watches and Wonders. So I like the way it looks, but it ain't got any Arabic numerals. It's not easy to read. It's not particularly large. I do not see why you would call this a Pro Pilot. I'm completely at a loss. Any of them. These are generic sports watches, right? I mean, we just got baton indices or stick indices, like you might see on an Oyster Perpetual or something, or a date, or excuse me, a date just. I love the dial texture. I like the titanium. I like the integrated bracelet. The power reserve on these things is incredible. Absolutely incredible. But because it's 5-day power reserve. And even the movement finishing looks pretty good. But I do not see why you call this a pilot watch. Absolutely, absolutely weird to me. But 39 millimeter, what's the price on this thing? I know it's high. I know it was high. I still remember when Oris was using third-party movements, and it went, 4,300. So at that point, I'm looking at the same price I would be considering Seamasters for, Seamaster 300. So that's just kind of, and again, I have watches that look kind of like dial-wise. I don't have any titanium watches. I've been thinking about getting a titanium, but I haven't pulled the trigger yet. Neff said, I believe the Komatsu comes with the sapphire. I've been looking at that red one for probably 3 years. Okay, I'll check the Komatsu. One of the ones I looked at, I was mineral, but I know they've got a number of them. So Just one of those things, I guess. But anyway, those were all the topics I was going to cover. I just kind of felt like, you know what? I haven't put out anything because I've been traveling for work and stuff for the last couple of weeks. We had a conference and stuff, like busy. So I was just like, it's summer. It's kind of slow. I'm not obligated to turn out a bunch of videos. I don't have that many subscribers. But I thought, I should probably do something. Surely there's been some things that have come out. And of course, there have been. I'll have to look into that Tudor Ranger, though. I haven't read up on it yet, but maybe that one will be one I can do a proper edited one, not a exhausted Dennis staring into a 720p webcam one. But I think that'll be it for today's stream. So I will say good night, everyone. Thanks for stopping by, or if you see it in record mode, hopefully we didn't ramble too long. It looks like we kept it under an hour, though, so that's pretty good. And I'll talk to y'all on the next one. Everybody have a great evening. Take care.